Hello, I'm Alexander Manelli. I'm a documentary filmmaker based in Northeast Pennsylvania, right near...
Script! What? The Electric City!
Coming to you in glorious 6K RAW LT on the Canon C80 in C-Log 2. Today we're going to be going through all of the RAW features on the new Canon C80. And what about 60p in RAW? We'll go through a few different ways to do that. Noise in the shadows. How do you get rid of it? I'm shooting on a 256 gig SD card, a V90 obviously. And if you look at the megabits per second there, 552 in RAW LT. So you get about 60 minutes on your card. There's 2 card slots. I have 2 cards in. That gives you about 2 hours of shooting in RAW. The only problem is they're not very cheap. So the 2 that I got, and the V90 cards are the reason that the C80 doesn't shoot 6K 60 like the Canon C400. But if you really do need 60 frames per second in RAW, you can still do it on this camera. You have 2 options. So the first is to switch from full frame into Super 35. So if you go into Super 35, you'll then notice that your frame rate options change and you can now shoot in 60p. However, you're cropped into Super 35. You're shooting at 4.3K. And you can actually unlock RAW ST in cropped Super 35 mode, but you're only limited to 2997 or 2398. More strange limitations from Canon. Yeah. So you can get 60p in cropped Super 35 mode, but only in RAW LT. You can get the higher, slightly more robust RAW ST only in cropped Super 35 mode, but only limited to 24 or 30, no 60p. The other option, you can output 6K 60 RAW to the Atomos Ninja. So that's exciting if you have an Atomos Ninja or if you really need 6K 60 RAW, this camera can do it. Dual slot recording. Someone asked, can you shoot RAW to both cards at the same time? And the answer is yes. So you can shoot full 6K RAW LT on the Canon C80 to both SD cards simultaneously. So that's great. So you can shoot a backup, but you also have other options. So if you're shooting 6K RAW on your main SD card, your second SD card, you could shoot proxies, you can shoot a sub recording, so you're just shooting maybe a 4K 10-bit 422 file. In RAW, some people have complained about the noise in the shadows. No! However, there are some workarounds. There are some options to address this. So the first and most obvious thing is you can add noise reduction software in post-production. Final Cut Pro has noise reduction built right in. It's pretty good. Let's zoom in to 200. And there's the noise. Not the greatest looking noise ever. But we can add some noise reduction. This is Final Cut Pro's built-in noise reduction. And I have it set to maximum. So let's see what that does to the image. And cleans it up pretty good. So there's noise reduction on, off, on. Now let's jump out and let's watch. All right, so let's take a look at that. Pretty good. Definitely an improvement. Now, one thing to note, you want your noise reduction in the order of operations to usually go first. So you want noise reduction to be the first thing, then any color adjustments like white balance, exposure, all that, and then your LUT goes last in those order of operations. Now, you can apply the LUT first just to get a sense of what your image looks like and what you need to correct, but it needs, in this chain of events here, to go last and noise reduction first. Because if noise reduction, let's say, goes last, then all of those corrections are going to be corrected on an image with more noise. So if you put it first, it's attacking the raw file, getting rid of the noise, then you're doing color adjustments, then you're adding a LUT. The second option has to do with Canon's triple bass ISO. And I'm going to do a separate video about that because there's a ton of misconceptions about it. Just wanted to hop on real quick to let you know that there was an issue with the autofocus while I was shooting out near the drive-in marquee. You may notice the lens hunt a little bit, and that is mainly because the C80 has a lot of new different options for autofocus that I'm not used to yet. I'm coming from the C200. It's a little more basic. So with this, I've been testing out a lot of different combinations to try to nail the best autofocus for me. I wouldn't put that against the C80. I probably didn't have the right combo of settings on. So I just wanted to come in and tell you that. So the Canon C80, specifically with its triple bass ISO, I leave my triple bass ISO on auto. So the camera will prioritize what bass ISO I should be shooting at to maximize dynamic range. Now that sounds great, and it is, but if you're trying to limit noise in the shadows, you might want to go in and kind of manipulate it yourself. What you'd want to do is set your bass ISO to maybe 3200 and then program your ISO to shoot at 1600. So by going down below your bass ISO, you're going to limit the noise. You're going to lower that noise floor. So again, if you set your bass ISO to 800, go down to 400. However, you will sacrifice some dynamic range in the highlights. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but it helps. All right, the third option is something you might learn in a high school video production class, but it kind of works. So this is the old expose to the right, overexpose a little bit, and then in your editing software, bring down your blacks a little bit, bring down your midtones, because really when you underexpose, that's when you're going to see even more noise. And the third option, which is the most controversial, in-camera noise reduction. And yes, you can turn on in-camera noise reduction in RAW on the Canon C80. So is it even RAW anymore? So if you go in and go from protect to unprotect, you can manipulate things like sharpness and noise reduction. So you can add noise reduction in RAW, and you can put it on auto, so it'll kind of adjust based on what you're shooting, where you're shooting, all that, and it kind of adaptively changes the noise reduction effect. And then there's this option here called spatial filter, and what this is it reduces noise by applying a soft focus-like effect on the entire picture. If you add that to 1 or 2 or 3, it'll reduce noise, but it kind of softens the image a little bit, which is not a terrible thing, especially because the C80 has a much sharper, detailed image than something like, the C70, the C200. So that might not be a bad idea if you're still trying to limit noise, especially in RAW. And it says, I'm looking at the C80 instruction manual right now, and it says after images are not produced, but the whole image will have a softer look when you apply the spatial filter. So after images are basically like artifacts. So that's interesting. So you can go in, change those settings, and then go back up and hit protect, and that will save those settings, not just in RAW, but if you go into 422 10-bit long GOP. As long as you're still in C-Log 2, you have adjusted those C-Log 2 settings now across the board. Some people hate in-camera noise reduction because it does bake in that noise reduction. I don't think it's bad. Most cameras do it. The Sony FX6, doesn't shoot internal RAW, but in its codecs, it's processing. It is, reducing the noise. If you don't need RAW and you are not a seasoned colorist and you want to turn something around quick, I would recommend shooting in WideDR, not C-Log 2. WideDR gives you a nice, pleasing curve, very minimal noise, and that's something where you don't need to do a lot of coloring. So it comes out looking pretty good. I've shot several feature-length documentaries, tons of shorts, all in WideDR. It is a really great picture profile. I highly recommend it. Does it have 16 plus stops of dynamic range? No, but it gives you that option to have less noise, have a really nice image right out of camera with no LUT, nothing. And you can still grade it a little bit if you want. So there you have it. Glorious 6K RAW on the Canon C80. Am I even in focus right now? I don't know.